Your aunt is standing in your mother's kitchen talking about Derek. Derek got promoted to regional manager at an insurance company in Charlotte.
Derek bought a townhouse.
Derek is finally settling down. She says all of this with the specific warmth people reserve for information they think reflects well on them, and everyone around the kitchen island nods in the right places. You are at the counter cutting bread. You have been cutting bread for 4 minutes because it gives your hands something to do and because nobody is asking you anything.
This is a Sunday.
You drove 40 minutes to be here. You are wearing a gray pullover from a discount sporting goods store, 3 winters old. Your car is behind your uncle's truck in the driveway. A 2020 Corolla, 74,000 miles, sun-faded left mirror casing you haven't replaced. Your net worth crossed $2 million 8 months ago. Nobody in this kitchen knows.
You haven't told them.
You're not planning to. The bread doesn't need this much attention. You give it the attention anyway. It didn't start with a decision to keep things hidden. It started earlier, with a feeling you couldn't name yet. You were 26. You had just closed your first small wholesale account, a regional grocery chain that agreed to carry a private label cleaning supply line you'd put together out of a rented storage unit. Thin margins, modest volume. But the check cleared, and you sat in your car in a strip mall parking lot reading the deposit notification, and the first thing you felt wasn't excitement.
It was caution.
Not fear exactly. More like the reflex of someone who had watched things get complicated the moment they became visible. You'd watched your father announce every business idea he ever had at the dinner table, before any of those ideas had earned that kind of airtime. The announcements were enthusiastic. Most of the ideas were never mentioned again. The gap between what people say they're building and what they actually build is wide, and the audience you told about it makes that gap expensive. You kept the cleaning supply account to yourself. You told your mother you were working on something. She asked if it was going well. You said it was coming along. She went back to the stove.
First brick.
The second brick came 2 years later at a family gathering a lot like this one. Your cousin Alicia had just launched a clothing resale business and mentioned it at dinner. Within 40 minutes she had collected 3 unsolicited pieces of advice from people who had never run anything, 2 requests from relatives who wanted inventory at cost, and a detailed opinion from your Uncle Raymond about market saturation. Alicia smiled through all of it. In the last 10 minutes her eyes were doing something that had nothing to do with smiling. You watched that and made a note of it.
Not written down.
The kind that settles into the part of your brain that governs behavior. The note said, silence isn't dishonesty. Silence is protection. Not just for you. For the thing you're building. So you kept building quietly. The cleaning supply line grew into a distribution contract with 2 commercial property management companies. You figured out that businesses with recurring maintenance needs are some of the most reliable clients around, because the need doesn't pause. An office building gets dirty every day people are working in it. That need isn't emotional. It doesn't respond to market sentiment. It just accumulates on surfaces until someone addresses it, and someone always does, because if they don't, there are consequences. You folded the income into a small commercial space.
Not retail.
A unit in an industrial park off a county highway, the kind of building with a loading bay and painted concrete floors and fluorescent lights that hum at a frequency nobody ever mentions. You ran your first product line out of that space and hired 2 people part-time. You didn't tell your family about the industrial unit. When asked what you were up to, you said you were doing some supply work. That was accurate. The thing about family is that it runs on a shared story. Every family has one. The story the group tells itself about who everyone is and what everyone is worth. It gets established early and revised slowly, sometimes not at all. The one that had formed around you by your late 20s was smart enough, steady, not flashy, probably fine. Not the one who was going to do something remarkable.
Not someone to watch.
Just a solid, quiet presence at holidays, someone who helped carry things and remembered how people took their coffee and didn't need much maintenance as a family member. That wasn't malicious. It was just the story that had calcified in the absence of evidence to the contrary. And because you had deliberately held back the evidence, the story stuck. This is the part that takes some time to make peace with. You watch Derek get celebrated for the regional manager promotion. You know that promotion is a salary in the low 6 figures, because Derek mentioned the number to your uncle who mentioned it to your mother who passed it along because she thought you might find it encouraging.
That word.
Encouraging. You turned it over in your mind and set it back down. Your net income last year was $340,000. Nobody in this family knows that. The only person outside of you who knows is your accountant, Sandra, a methodical woman who has been doing small business accounting for 22 years and communicates almost entirely through itemized spreadsheets and the occasional one-line observation delivered without expression. You are not going to correct the narrative. You are going to keep cutting bread. There's a specific thing that happens when family members begin to suspect, even vaguely, that you might be doing better than the story allows for.
It doesn't announce itself. It comes in sideways.
Your Uncle Raymond called on a Tuesday in October. Notable, because Raymond doesn't call on Tuesdays. Raymond calls on Sundays after whatever game ends, and the calls run 4 to 7 minutes and consist mostly of him summarizing the game. This call lasted 23 minutes. For the first 8, he asked about your work with slightly more attention than his usual register.
Follow-up questions.
What kind of clients you worked with? Whether business had been consistent. You answered the same way you always do: fine, steady, mostly commercial, nothing dramatic. Then in minute 9 he mentioned that his son Brandon was looking to get into something entrepreneurial. Brandon is 24. He has left 3 jobs in 2 years and currently works part-time at an auto parts counter. Raymond didn't ask directly. He circled the subject the way someone circles a parking spot they're not sure is actually available. He mentioned Brandon twice more before hanging up. You said you'd keep your ear out for anything that might suit Brandon. You have kept your ear out. You've heard nothing suitable. Brandon was never mentioned again. Your mother is the one you think about most in all of this. She worked a front desk position at a medical group for 19 years. She raised you on a schedule with no room for uncertainty and very little for error. She drove a used Pontiac until the transmission failed, then a used Civic until you were old enough to help her find something more reliable. She kept a written budget in a 3-ring binder on the counter next to the phone and updated it by hand every Friday. She doesn't know what you're worth. She knows you're doing okay. She asks about it occasionally in the way she asks about most things, directly, without decoration. You've told her, it's going well, the business is stable, you're not struggling. She heard that and something in her posture settled, just slightly. That settling was enough. She wasn't asking for a number. She was asking for the thing underneath the number. Are you going to be all right? You answered that honestly. Yes.
More than all right.
What you haven't told her, what you sit with on certain Tuesday evenings when the apartment is quiet and the accounts have updated and the number on the screen is larger than anything her 3-ring binder could have anticipated, is that you've already set aside enough to cover whatever she might need.
Medical. Housing.
Anything that could arrive uninvited in the back half of her life. That money sits in a separate account, structured and ready. She doesn't know it exists. You don't plan to tell her until there's a reason to.
That's not distance.
That's the specific way you know how to love someone who taught you that stability is not a small thing. There was a moment last spring you think about sometimes. Your grandmother turned 78. The gathering was at your aunt's house, catering tray from down the street, paper plates, your grandmother at the center of the dining room table looking pleased in the way she looks pleased at these things, taking everything in without requiring it to be more than it was. Your cousin Marcus, who works in finance and has the vocabulary to prove it, spent part of the afternoon discussing his investment portfolio in the direction of whoever would listen.
Index funds.
A recent reallocation toward international exposure. He mentioned, with the specific casualness that isn't actually casual, that he was on track to be in a very comfortable position by 50. You were sitting 3 feet away eating off a paper plate. Marcus earns good money. His portfolio is real. His confidence isn't performance exactly. It's the natural result of being someone who measures progress out loud and receives confirmation in return. He has built a life where the scoreboard is visible, and the visible scoreboard is part of how he understands his own progress. You understand progress differently. You are not on track to be comfortable by 50. You are already there at 34, with no visible scoreboard, no audience, and no confirmation loop. The confirmation you get arrives as quarterly summaries from Sandra, deposit notifications at odd hours, the quiet of a Tuesday morning when nothing requires your urgent attention because the systems you built are running without you. Marcus didn't ask what you were up to. You were not visibly up to anything. You had a second paper plate portion and talked to your grandmother about her garden for 15 minutes. She grows tomatoes. She has opinions about soil. It was the best conversation of the afternoon. The harder thing is not the dismissal. The dismissal is manageable. You have made structural peace with it. People sort you according to the visible evidence, and you have calibrated the visible evidence to produce exactly this sorting. The gray pullover, the used Corolla, the low-key answers, the way you don't expand when people ask what you're working on. The sorting is predictable, and once you accept that the sorting is the point, it stops feeling like a slight. The harder thing is the distance it creates in places you didn't design it to create. Your brother Elias is 4 years younger. He has been trying to build a landscaping company for 3 years. He has the physical capacity, the client relationships, the equipment knowledge, the seasonal reliability that makes that kind of business work in the right market. What he doesn't have is clean books, a functioning estimate system, or a clear sense of the difference between what a job costs and what a job should be priced at. He has also never asked you for help.
Not once.
Because the story he's operating inside says you're his older sibling who does okay with some supply business, not the person in the family with relevant experience.
The story is wrong.
But you built it, and it is working as designed, and one thing it does that you didn't fully account for is make it difficult for the people you'd actually want to help to think to ask you. You found a way around it. Last fall you asked Elias if he'd want to walk through his numbers with you.
Not as an expert.
You framed it as curiosity, as someone who runs a small operation and is always trying to understand how other small operations work.
He said sure.
You spent a Saturday afternoon at his kitchen table going through his project costs, his pricing, his time tracking, or the absence of it. You didn't give him answers. You asked questions that pointed toward them. What does this job actually take in hours when you account for travel and cleanup? What is your equipment depreciation rate? If you lose a client in March, what does that do to February's projections, and have you projected February? He had not projected February. By the end of the afternoon, Elias had a whiteboard covered in numbers he had produced himself, working through questions you asked him. 3 weeks later he restructured his pricing on mid-sized jobs and increased his margin by 11%. He didn't know you helped him get there. He thought he worked it out.
He did work it out. That was the point.
There's a version of this that would be simpler. In the simpler version, you tell your family what you've built. The number arrives at a dinner table and recalibrates every relationship in the room. Your aunt stops talking exclusively about Derek. Raymond stops circling subjects about Brandon. Marcus recalibrates his scoreboard against yours. Your mother updates the picture she carries of what her child's life looks like. You have imagined this version. You've imagined it in enough detail to know what it costs.
It costs the ordinary life.
The Sunday kitchen where you are allowed to cut bread in peace. The conversations that reach you instead of the version of you the number would create. The friendship with your grandmother's garden. The Saturday afternoons at Elias's kitchen table where the help you're giving actually lands because he believes it's coming from a peer, not someone performing generosity from a height he can't see. You are not hiding. That framing is too simple for what this actually is. You are maintaining specific conditions. Conditions under which the people you love can relate to you as a person rather than a resource, and under which the help you offer lands as help rather than charity, which is a different thing entirely and produces different results in people. You can observe what your family actually needs instead of receiving a curated version of what they think you want to hear. Sandra sends the quarterly summary on a Thursday morning. You are in the parking lot of one of your commercial distribution clients, waiting for a meeting that starts in 12 minutes. The email loads in the passenger seat while you're reviewing notes on a legal pad. You read the summary line and then read it again.
It's a real number.
A number with a shape you've been watching approach for a long time, and now it's here, in Sandra's 12-point font, surrounded by line items and footnotes and a brief note at the bottom asking whether you want to revisit your LLC structure before year-end. You reply to Sandra, yes on the LLC review. Schedule something for next month. You put your phone in your jacket pocket. You pick up your legal pad. You walk into the building for your meeting. The meeting is about a new supply contract. You focus on the contract. The meeting goes well. You shake 2 hands, schedule a follow-up, and walk back to the Corolla. There's no ceremony for this.
You didn't expect any.
You expected exactly what arrived, a number in a font you recognize, on a morning already scheduled for other things, asking for your attention briefly before the day continued. 11 years ago, you netted your first real margin check from the cleaning supply account and drove to your mother's house for Sunday dinner without saying anything. You sat at her table, ate, helped carry dishes, and drove home afterward in the same car you arrived in, the number sitting somewhere behind your sternum, quiet and yours. It still feels like that. Exactly like that. Which means the feeling was never calibrated to the number. It was calibrated to the architecture. The fact that the system you built is running, generating, compounding, operating according to the logic you laid into it on Tuesday afternoons when nobody was watching and Saturday mornings at kitchen tables and in parking lots and storage units and industrial buildings with humming fluorescent lights. Your family will gather again in 6 weeks. There will be a catering tray and paper plates. Marcus will mention his portfolio. Your aunt will update everyone on Derek. Your grandmother will have something to say about her tomatoes. You will drive there in the Corolla. You will wear something from the discount sporting goods store. You will cut bread if bread needs cutting. You will ask your grandmother about the soil. And somewhere in the conversation, Elias will probably mention that his margins have been better this year. He'll say he reworked some of his pricing. He'll say he's not sure why it took him so long to see it.
You'll nod.
You'll say that sometimes it just takes sitting with the numbers long enough.
He'll agree.
The conversation will move on. Nobody will know what that exchange actually was.
You will. That's enough.
That has always been enough. The story the family holds about you will stay intact. The quiet one, the steady one, the older sibling who runs a small supply business and drives a used car and doesn't need much.
They're not wrong.
They're just working with the information available. You provided that information deliberately. You'll provide it again next Sunday.
And the Sunday after that.
Everything keeps running. And somewhere in the gap between what your family sees and what is actually there, you keep building the next thing, the same way you built every other thing, on a Tuesday in a parking lot, without an audience, without ceremony, and without the faintest need for either.